So next topic which we are going to discuss, sorry, the next part of this particular topic is planning and designing. So let us discuss the principles involved in planning and designing cloud infrastructure. Now in this section we are going to highlight on scaling, loose coupling, redundancy, cost optimization, automation and security. Now, scalability. Cloud computing provides virtually unlimited on-demand capacity. Though we do not have, like as we discussed earlier, we do not have any information on the storage. How much storage does Amazon has in their data center? But we always assume that it has unlimited capacity. Okay, so accordingly, we just we resize our resources. So it is like virtually unlimited on-demand capacity, so you can scale whenever you need. There are two types of scaling we have, that is vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. Now let's see what is vertical scaling. I think there is a lag, Neelam. What about others? Can you see my visual? I am at visual number 53, vertical scaling. Okay. So just check from your end. Neelam, can you just, I think there is a lag at your end. Okay. Now, there is a vertical scaling. Vertical scaling means upgrading your existing virtual machine, or upgrading or changing the specification of the existing machine. Vertical scaling means increasing the specification of an individual resource. For example, increasing the memory, CPU on a server. Okay, increasing the CPU memory on a server, or any of the configuration you are changing on an existing server, you are upgrading your server. That is, we call it as a vertical scaling. Vertical scaling can eventually hit a limit and sometimes prove expensive, because see, vertical scaling we can scale up to certain level. There are limitations involved in that, because it depends on the hardware. How many slots do you have? Accordingly you can add memory, you can add storage. So it totally depends on, there are limitations or the constraint on the hardware part. You cannot just scale up like as is it's required. It reaches to some threshold. Okay, so that's your vertical scaling. Neelam, you have to check from your end. I think there is a lag, that's why you are not able to hear me properly. Others can hear me. Okay, there is some network issues, I guess, Neelam, on your end. Then we have a horizontal scaling. Horizontal scaling means adding multiple resources or identical multiple resources. That is your horizontal scaling. Let's say I have a web server and the entire load is, I have just deployed one web server, so the entire load is coming to that web server. So initially when I deployed, just a very few, as you can see on the left side, only few customers were using my web server or accessing my web server. But now my customer has increased and a lot of customers started using my web server. So what I need to do to, because this web server is unable to handle that much load, I can just replicate, I can create identical, means I can add one more resource which again on which I can deploy my web server. So this is nothing but horizontal scaling, adding identical resources or multiple resources, right, so that we can balance the load. But not every architecture can distribute their workload to multiple resources. So what kind of architecture supports the horizontal scaling? We will discuss that shortly. Now we have a stateless application. Stateless application is one that needs no knowledge of previous interaction and stores no session information. Example, a web server that provides the same web page to any end user. For example, I have deployed a static web page, okay, on a particular web server. So now that static web page definitely will not keep any information, any session information on the local server. That is a stateless application. When the application is not keeping any information locally in that server, whether it is a session information or any other information locally in that server, it is a kind of a stateless application. Okay, or could be, it can be a dynamic website also, and that is not keeping the information locally, but it is keeping on an external storage. So that also comes under stateless application. Any application which is not keeping the information locally, the data locally in the server, but keeping it in some kind of central storage. Okay, so these are all stateless application. Push model. A popular way to distribute the workload across multiple resources is by using a load balancer. So load balancer uses push model. Means load balancer is will face to your to the public or to internet. So all the request will be handled by load balancer. The request from internet will come to load balancer, and load balancer will distribute those requests to the servers in the backend. Okay, so it will literally push those requests to the instances in the backend. So this is a kind of a push example. Pull example. In the pull model, tasks that need to be performed can be stored as messages in a queue, and multiple compute resources can pull and process the message in a distributed fashion. Means whatever task has to get executed will be there maintained in a queue, and the resources or the instances or the application will take one by one, pulling the message from the queue and then executing it, right? Just like how it happens in a normal server compute, the processor will take one by one request, fetch the request from the memory and will execute that. Okay, then we have stateless components. So there are a few components, just like we discussed stateless applications, we have stateless components. Components in the architecture can be made stateless by not storing anything on the local file system and instead storing user or session based information in a database. So nothing is stored locally, kept in a local server, but instead it will be kept in a database or on a shared storage layer. Okay, so these whatever components are highlighted are by default stateless in nature. DynamoDB, MySQL, these are all keeping the data not locally but on a central storage. S3, again, it is not keeping it locally. Fine. EFS file system. So all these are stateless components. We'll keep the data on some kind of external or the central storage. Then we have stateful application. Stateful is just opposite to stateless, wherein the session information is kept locally in the server. Some layers of architecture cannot be turned into stateless components. For example, database which are stateful by definition or application designed to run on a single server. Let's say this particular database, RDS or DynamoDB, is keeping the data locally in the internal storage. Okay, so this is a kind of a stateful. Now we cannot make it stateless because it is keeping the data locally in the server, within the server. Right? Distributed processing. Distributed processing, when see, in situations which require large amount of data to be processed, a distributed processing approach should be used. Now for example, I have a very big task that should get executed. Now if the entire task is submitted to one CPU, it will be submitted like instruction by instruction or thread by thread. It will get submitted to CPU, and then one by one it will execute those instructions, right? So this will take lot of time. It will be kind of a sequential distribution, or you can say dispatching of information or instruction to the CPU. Sequential execution happens. But the same task, if I divide it into multiple you can say task, and then if I submit each to a different processor, it will execute parallelly and the execution will be even fast. Okay, so this will be distributed processing will be helpful when you have a big task to get execute. So you can create multiple fragments and then you can distribute across the processing unit to execute it parallelly. Disposable resources. Almost all resources in the cloud environment are disposable. Disposable means use and throw. Okay, you can use it when you are not requiring it. You can just scrap it, you can throw it. So new instances can be launched when required and can be disposed when the requirement ends. So all comes under this category, disposable. Then we have automate compute resource initiation. AWS features that make new environment creation an automated and repeatable process are. So as already we discussed, how can we automate the entire environment by taking help of the CloudFormation template. But here few more features are highlighted. By using bootstrapping, golden images and hybrid approach, we can automate the this environment. We can creation of the environment we can automate. Now let's say what is bootstrapping. See, bootstrapping is nothing but, let's say I have a requirement. I want to launch an EC2 instance. Okay, let's say a Linux instance. And once after the instance is launched, I want to install some application. Okay, and this process, like is launching an EC2 instance, that I will do manually by selecting the type and all that stuff. But after the launching of instance is done, I want that it should automatically install the application, or let's say it should automatically install some package. So what I will do, I will write a bootstrap script. Okay, bootstrapping is nothing but defining a script and mentioning that script. While you are launching an instance, you can upload the script or you can define it then and there itself, so that post installation or post launching of instance, what action it should take, what it should execute, that you can define in the script, and it will execute that, and it will install the package or the application what you want. So that's nothing but your bootstrapping. I will showcase you where you can use this while we launch the EC2 instance. Okay, so it will automatically execute the script, and it will do the perform the action what is defined in the script. Then we have something known as golden images. So what we can do, once after we launch the instance, let's say I have launched the instance, I have installed the application, I have done all the configuration required for the application, everything, the entire setup is done. Now my system like application is up and running. What I can do, I can take the snapshot of that, so that in case if it goes down, I can use the snapshot to recreate the same this one, so that I don't have to follow the complete procedure what I followed for making my application up and running. So I will launch the instance, I will do the configuration, I'll take the snapshot, and by using the snapshot, I can create a new instance again. I can replicate that, I can use it for cloning, I can use it for replicating to some other environment, okay, or I can use it for disaster recovery. Fine. So this is the snapshot what we are creating by using an existing instance is known as golden image. Okay. Hybrid approach is both combination of both your snapshot as well as your, sorry, I was just looking at the, I will come back to your questions, just hold on guys. So hybrid approach is your combination of bootstrapping and golden images. Means I will launch the instance, post launching of the instance, certain script should get executed, that I will define with bootstrapping. Once that is done, I will take the snapshot, that will be, it's like a, once I take the snapshot, it's my golden image, and by using the snapshot I will launch new instance. So the new instance will have whatever I have defined in the bootstrap script, that will automatically come in the new instance, will be deployed, as well as it will be the exact replica of like everything, like same EC2, right? So in the instance, in the bootstrap script, I have mentioned to install some application, right? And once the instance is launched, it will install the application automatically. And now I'm taking the snapshot of that, again launching another instance by using that snapshot. So I will get along with that application, my instance will be launched. Fine. Now infrastructure as a code. Infrastructure as a code. AWS assets are programmable, right? As we discussed in the cloud formation, the entire infrastructure you can define as a script, and you can use the script to relaunch the infrastructure. So that is known as infrastructure as a code. So assets are programmable. You can apply all the techniques discussed earlier to entire environment and not just individual resource, complete thing. Okay. Now, AWS automation services. AWS allows you to reduce the level of manual interaction in your environment. You can react to a variety of events without any manual effort by using AWS automation services. Okay, so the services are highlighted. You can use Beanstalk, auto recovery of EC2, auto scaling, CloudWatch alarm. You can, so these are like for automating things. I can automate the complete thing. EC2, as it fails, it should automatically recover, automatically it should scale by using auto scaling, or it should perform some action on certain events because I have already defined the alarm, right? Or OpsWork life cycle events, which like again, it's an open source used for deploying the resources, multiple resources together. So I can just use this automation, these services for automating my things. Okay, automating the infrastructure. Now, loose coupling. Design applications that comprise smaller, loosely coupled components so that there is no single point of failure. So, as we discussed in the failure management, we will have to think negative at each component level. We will have to have a redundancy, right? The components or the what I can say, the hardware should not be tightly coupled. Should not have a single, should not have a dependency. if it has a dependency, there will be a single point of failure. Okay, so that is what your loose coupling is. If it is tightly coupled, if one component fails, the other component will also fail because it is tightly coupled and there is a dependency. So loose coupling is nothing but providing redundancy and identifying all single point of failure on a component level, and then providing the redundancy on that level. That is your loose coupling, so that if one component fails, the other will still function. Well-defined interfaces ensure that components interact with each other through a RESTful APIs. Okay, a proper communication between the component resources should be able to communicate with each other, because ultimately we are integrating multiple resources together within the AWS environment, right? My EC2 should be able to communicate with VPC, VPC should be able to communicate with subnet, or the ELB should be able to communicate with EC2. So there should be a proper communication channel. The networking should be set properly. Okay, so that is required. Rest is nothing but representational state transfer. RESTful APIs it is API that uses HTTP request to get, put, post, and delete data. Okay, HTTP request for getting, putting the data, posting, and all that stuff. Then we have service discovery. Loose coupling ensures services interact with each other without any prior knowledge of their existence. For example, behind the ELB, I have, let's say, two instances. Okay. Now, loose coupling is nothing but my ELB is not tightly coupled with the instance. Fine. If any one instance goes down and there is another instance coming in that place, so definitely that instance will have different IP address. So my ELB should be able to still communicate with the newly launched instance. Fine. So because it continuously checks the health of the server which is behind the ELB. So since the ELB is not tightly coupled to the instances, it will be able to communicate even if a changes happen in the backend. Right. So no knowledge is required, no prior knowledge of that instance is required. It can start communicating as it comes back behind the ELB. Okay. Asynchronous integration. Asynchronous integration involves the use of an intermediate storage layer such as SQS queue, which is highlighted here. This approach means that when server A completes its action, it sends a notification to SQS. This way the compute resources are decoupled and not directly linked to each other. For decoupling environment, we use this asynchronous integration. For example, let's say it is not decoupled. Let's say there is no intermediate storage layer. Server A, resource A is communicating with resource B directly. Okay, there is a direct one-to-one connection is there. Now this server A will communicate with server B through IP address, right? What if the server B goes down? What if a new server comes in the place of server B? Definitely that server B will have a different IP address. Now server A was having the information of the old IP and it is trying to reach to the same IP what the previous server was using. And still because that server was down and some new IP has been given, some new address has come, the resource A or server A is unable to communicate with resource B now. Okay, because of direct communication or point-to-point communication, right? So instead of having a direct communication, if we add some intermediate storage layer like SQS here, so resource A will communicate with resource B, or resource B will communicate with resource C through the intermediate layer. So even if one goes down and then some other server comes in that place and even the IP gets changed, still the communication will happen because there is no direct communication, and the communication will not affect. Resource will still continue sending the messages to the SQS, and then once the resource comes up, the message can be pulled from the SQS. So this is nothing but asynchronous integration, or for decoupling it is used. For decoupling the environment, SQS is used for decoupling as well as asynchronous integration. Then we have something known as graceful failure. Applications are designed to fail gracefully, as this allows other resources to continue service without causing a complete outage. Okay, when something fails, when some server fails or application fails, it should gracefully go down. Okay, gracefully going down is nothing but it will the failover should happen. The primary server, once it goes down, it should fail over to the backup server. Okay, the secondary server. If that is happening, then we say that it's a graceful failure. And the user's connectivity to the application or to the website should not go down. The user's connectivity should be same as before. Okay, so without the user knowledge, the failover should happen, and that since we are using a DNS, that is Route 53, it can switch to the other server. The information of the backup server is already defined in the DNS server. Okay. Yes, messages will be in queue. In the last visual, messages will be in the queue until server is up, right? So message will be kept in a queue. Once the message is pulled from the queue by resource B, it will be removed from the queue. Till then, it will be there in the queue. Okay. There is a time also we will discuss in SQS. Okay, we have a time limit also. Time threshold is there. Time to leave. So till that time, the message will be there in a queue, and once the message is pulled, it will be removed. But we can configure those things. Then services, not server. To help your organization grow, AWS provides a suite of services to lower IT cost. All these are services, not a server. Even a database or a physical machine, a server, everything is a service, right? Everything is offered as a service. So the list of services are highlighted here, as already we discussed various categories. Database. Now, with AWS database, usage is not restricted by constraint on licensing, support capabilities, and hardware availability. AWS offers fully managed, easily scalable services. Now, on the database side, you have fully managed and easily scalable databases are available. For example, DynamoDB, RDS, these are fully managed services. Okay, so the usage is not restricted to the licensing and all. So if you are using a fully managed database, you are charged for as you use. You are not charged separately on the license or for the license or for the usage of that. So it's like the licensing price is also added in the usage. Okay, so you will be charged just for the usage. It will not be a separate charge. Muthu, that question is related to SQS again. I'm not getting it completely, but as I can see few words, we will discuss that. As I said, SQS, we have a separate topic under application. So I will showcase you SQS, we will discuss in depth. Okay. So from asynchronous integration point of view, the example was highlighted. So from that point of view, we discuss over here at this point. Okay. But SQS, again, we are going to revisit. That's why I will ignore or I will not answer the question right away. Okay. Now we have redundancy. So redundancy removes single point of failure from systems. Okay. So all of you know that what is redundancy. For on each component level, as we discussed earlier, there should be a redundancy implemented. So this is achieved using multiple resources for the same task or standby or active mode. You can have active or you can have active passive. Okay. So passive will be used only when the active is down. Active can be used for redundancy, that is fault tolerance, as well as for load balancing. Yeah, standby redundancy highlighted here. It's used for stateful components like database. If the database is keeping the data locally, it is stateful in nature, and then for that we will be having a redundancy standby database. So the standby resource becomes the primary resource when a failure happens to the primary. So it will do a failover to standby. Active redundancy, it is all are active and all will be used for fault tolerance as well as for this one load balancing. Okay, so active redundancy is where multiple redundant compute resources share request and absorb the loss of one or more failing instances. So it can use, as I said, for fault tolerance also. Now behind the load balancer we have multiple web servers or the instances. If any one instance goes down, the other are still there. So can be used for redundancy, and it's even used for load balancing. So it can even handle the request as well. So this is like example of active. Okay. Then we have failure, load balancing and fault detection, fault tolerance. The fault tolerance is nothing but when a fault occurs, there should be a redundant component to tolerate that. Fine. So this is a kind of a fault tolerance, standby redundancy. Database, my primary server on which the database is installed, it's acting as a primary server. if a primary server goes down, I have already implemented the standby database, so it will switch to standby database. So this is just used in the standby, means only it is giving me fault tolerance. When a fault occurs to primary, the standby is tolerating that, means it is switching to standby. But both are not active. Okay, this we cannot call it as load balancing. All my requests, when both are in the running condition, both are in the working condition, the primary and standby, all my requests will be handled only by primary database. This is just acting as a standby database, not for load balancing. Okay, so that is your fault tolerance. And in this example, it is fault tolerant also as well as load balancing. So each web server is used for handling the request. Okay, so load balancing the request. Now failure detection, automatic failure detection allows you to react to an outage automatically without the need for manual intervention. So we know that we have lot of services, options, features available with the help of which we can detect the failure and we can react to the failure. Means we can define the response to the failure, right? We can predefine it. So services like ELB and Route 53 let you configure health check to automatically route your traffic to healthy resources. So we have the services which has this kind of feature. The ELB and the Route 53 will continuously check the health. Okay, because these are ELB and Route 53 is facing internet. These are the services which are facing to internet. So this will any request that comes to ELB or Route 53, it has to forward that request to the resources, to the appropriate resources, right? So it will be communicating with the internet also as well as with the resources internally and internet externally, right? So it has to continuously check the health of the resources which is there behind the ELB or behind the Route 53, and if it finds that it is not able to reach to any of the resource, it will mark it as unhealthy, right? So this is like detecting the failure automatically, and if we implement auto scaling with ELB, automatically the auto scaling will automatically launch a new resource. ELB will detect the failure and auto scaling will launch the resource, right? So that is how we can integrate multiple services together and we can work on the failure detection. Durable data storage, replicating your data to other sites or resources, protect its availability and integrity. So we can replicate the data. If the data is very important, we can replicate to a different availability zone. We can keep it in a different region as well. The 3 ways to replicate data. Now, how can you replicate the data? To improve the durability, we can replicate the data across region or across AZ, and there are different ways to replicate the data, that is synchronous and asynchronous and quorum based. Now synchronous replication, what it does, it will write the data. Synchronous replication ensure that data has been durably stored on both primary and a replication location. This is a primary resource and this is a replication resource. Now any write operation, suppose a user is performing some write operation, the write will go to primary and as well as the write will happen on the replication on both the places. Once the write operation is done both on primary and replication, only then the acknowledgement is sent back to the user, and that indicates that the write is completed. It will mark that the write is over. This is a kind of a synchronous replication. Okay, but synchronous replication is possible only when there is the distance is very much important between the availability zone. We can have a synchronous replication, not between the regions, because it's quite apart from there is the distance, as I said, important, so it is geographically apart the region, so it's not possible to have synchronous. Asynchronous replication. In asynchronous replication, it decouples the primary node from the replication node. So a write operation doesn't wait for any acknowledgement. It means that a user is performing a write operation, the write has been done on the primary resource and the write is happening to the replication resource in the backend. Okay, it has initiated write to the replication in the backend, but it will not wait for that write to get over. Once the write operation is done in the primary resource, it will immediately send the acknowledgement back to the user, and while the write is in progress to the replication resource. This is your asynchronous. Okay. Next is quorum replication. Quorum based replication is a mix of both synchronous and asynchronous. Now depending on how many replication resources you have, so what it does, once a write is done in the primary resource, it will perform write operation. Let's say I have 4 replication resources. Okay, now not necessary that it should perform write to all 4 before it sends the acknowledgement. So what it does, it will perform write to some of the resources, replication resource, and then we can define the quorum. Let's say quorum I have defined as 50%. So once the write is done to 50% of replication resources, it will send the acknowledgement back to the user. Okay, that is your quorum based replication, a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous. Yeah, what if write fails after some time? See, in both synchronous and asynchronous, still you have the primary resource with the write operation, with the complete write. Okay, Muthu? So still we have, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous, both. See, in synchronous, the write is completed when it is written on both the things. So it is, you have both. Okay, in quorum based, in asynchronous, at least you have a write in primary resource, and while the write is happening in the, it's in progress. It is initiated, but it's not waiting for to get it over before it sends the acknowledgement. Okay. And this asynchronous replication has to be selected or will happen when the primary and replication resource are geographically apart. So synchronous is not at all possible in that environment. Okay. Now coming to data center resilience. So if you want the complete data center redundancy for the complete data center, so a traditional data center failover involves failing overall your resources to a secondary distance data center. So how we design a DR site? The entire DR site is a replication of your primary data center. So when a primary fails, the entire means the failover will happen to the secondary or a DR site. So it's exact replica of your primary. Due to the distance between the two data centers, synchronous replication is often impractical, as I told you just now. It will be slow and involves data loss, and as such is not tested very often. So because of the distance between the primary and DR site, the synchronous replication is not possible. Data loss is also possible in synchronous replication. Okay, because of the data packet has to travel from primary to secondary. Okay, and if suppose before it reaches to the let's say secondary, time to reach what I can say, the threshold. Okay, there will be a time. Within that time frame, it should reach to the secondary data center. But if it is not reached to the secondary data center, it will mark that as a lost packet or packet drop, and then again it has to send that packet. So this will be like a lot of network. This will be utilized in this. It will become very slow, and duplication of packet is possible. So that's why synchronous replication is not possible in this particular kind of setup, wherein you have the data center in a different region, DR site in a different region. Okay. Now data center resilience. Suppose you have a DR site and the primary site within the same region. One availability zone is acting as your primary, the other is acting as your DR. So AWS data centers are configured to provide multiple AZ in each region with low latency network connectivity. We have a connectivity between the AZ. This means replicating your data across data centers in a synchronous manner, and as a result the failover becomes simple. Okay, so here in this example we can use in this kind of setup we can have the synchronous kind of replication.